Ready? Okay, we're going to start. Good afternoon, everybody. Are we recording? And of course, all right, we're going to try again. Everybody, ready? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Girard. I am the senior admin in the group Floxed Canada, the official group in Facebook organizing this event. We are gathered here today to raise awareness about fluoroquinolone antibiotics. These are some of the most commonly prescribed antibiotics in the world, and yet they were originally approved as the big guns. They were supposed to only be for anthrax, the plague, infections in your bone marrow, things like that. However, doctors prescribe these drugs willy-nilly. They hand them out like candy. In Canada, it's over 3.1 million prescriptions a year for this class of antibiotics. And yet this class of antibiotics is from a class of drugs called topoisomerase inhibitors. These drugs are normally used for chemotherapy. So when the doctors give these drugs to people, it's like they're giving them chemotherapy without letting them know that they're taking chemo. And worse yet, doctors often increase the dose or the duration of these drugs, and so the patients are getting overdosed. And the reactions to these drugs are absolutely horrific. I'll be back up in a little while to describe my thing. I'm just going to focus right now on explaining about fluoroquinolones and the fact that the way that they affect people is just so overwhelming. The reason of this is because these drugs are very, very permeable throughout the body, which is great. Like I said, if you do need an antibiotic in your bone marrow, these drugs will get there. But that's also why they devastate. They cause problems head to toe. People who have adverse reactions to these drugs tend to experience a syndrome with a huge number of serious debilitating health issues, ranging from mental issues to connective tissue damage to system failures that lead to further problems, vascular damage and so on, neurological damage, nerves failing to send proper signals to our digestive tract, for example, to move food along and digest food properly. So it's a chain reaction of cascading problems that happen to us, and usually these set in a delayed reaction. So the vast majority of people that this happens to have not made the connection. Who thinks of an antibiotic they took several seasons ago when their tendons rupture, or their hair falls out, or their teeth start cracking and splitting, or their lungs collapse, or they have cartilage lesions, or any of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other head to toe damage. So we've gathered people from around North America who have flown in to tell their stories and share their experiences. And so the first person we're going to have up is actually going to be the MC introducing everybody, and that's my sister Cindy Girard. So she's coming up now to say a little more and then introduce people and sort of sum up what we've heard afterwards.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone that is here. This is an incredibly urgent, epic battle that we're fighting. We're here at the provincial legislature because part of that battle is financial. Every single person that is damaged by these antibiotics becomes a burden to our tax-paying, our social safety net, our system here. When someone goes from being a healthy, active member of the community, paying taxes, contributing in their community, coaching soccer, participating in their religious activities, involved in their kids' schools, whatever it is, when they're damaged by these antibiotics, that all changes. They are no longer able to work. They're not paying taxes. They're now going to the doctor again and again and again. It affects us from head to toe. So they're going to different specialists. Our healthcare systems in both Canada and the US are, they break us up into body parts and body systems. They don't ever look at the whole person. And so when you have head to toe damage, you're seeing one specialist for the heart problems you're experiencing. You see another specialist for the brain fog. You see another specialist for the tendon ruptures. And actually, you could have tendon problems in your Achilles tendon, which is really common, or in your wrist, or in your elbows, or in your shoulders. And they're going to send you to different people for each of those. If you are on Ontario Disability Support and you manage to get physiotherapy, they'll only look at one body part at a time. This is just insane. So anyways, you go to see specialist after specialist after specialist, costing the province billions and billions of dollars. And because it is all one problem from head to toe, those specialists aren't communicating with each other. They're not discussing your case with each other. Matter of fact, a lot of them are really arrogant if you even suggest that they communicate with one of your other specialists. And so you're not getting adequate treatment. They're only treating their particular specialty. And because they're not looking at you as a whole person, they're not treating you with what you need. And a matter of fact, if they don't know what it is that's causing it, the treatment is often making things worse. So this is such an important cause. I don't even like the word cause, but I haven't got another one right now. And I'm so glad that the people are here, and I want to introduce the different speakers that we have. We've got people that have come in from all over North America to share their stories, to let you know how incredibly important it is for you to even understand what a fluoroquinolone is, to know those names of Cipro, Levaquin, Avalox, and all the others, so that you can take charge of your own health, so that you can be aware that these are meant only as a last resort. And when your doctor tries to give it to you for a suspected infection, or even a real infection but that's mild, you can say, no, give me something better, give me something safer. And then if you're experiencing health issues that you don't know where they came from, and your doctor's just saying, oh, you're just getting older, no. We're not meant to fall apart in our 40s or 30s. Even in your 60s, your body is not meant to be falling apart. Something is wrong. Don't listen to the doctor when they say, oh, you're just getting older. So our first guest, we're thrilled to have him, is Tim Alexander. And I'm going to have trouble. The sun is very bright here. Okay, so Tim Alexander is a talented filmmaker whose current project is Legal Death: In Drugs We Trust. He has been traveling across North America and is now in Canada to tell us about what he has witnessed as he has interviewed different victims of not just fluoroquinolones, but many different drugs, because this is actually just one part of the problem. There's all the drugs that we're being given have problems. And so Tim's going to share some of those things. And he's also going to share the tragedy in his own life that led him on this journey of producing this incredible documentary. Tim?
Be here today in Canada. We're all brought here for a common reason. We're brought here because of pain. Be it pain that happened to you, be it pain that happened to someone you love. Pain is the common denominator. My goal as a filmmaker is to bring international attention to people's pain. That's going to be done by bringing 200 people's voices together. Victims, loved ones of victims, experts, everything in between. It's one fight. We have to look at the entirety of this problem. I have learned so much. I've lived inside the pain. I've talked to people. I've touched your lives. You shared with me intimate details. And I've been able to see people function day in and day out in this condition. It's horrible. I have, as I've gone through this journey, experienced different people in different groups online, arguing whose condition is worse, who's suffering the most, who's hurting the most, whose withdrawal is the worst. That's not the fight that we should be having. Unity and numbers is the only thing that really makes a change. I'm very taken by what the Me Too movement, the LGBT movement has accomplished in such a short amount of time. Their numbers, and getting even people that weren't necessarily part of their groups to come in with them and say, hey, we feel what you're going through. We have to feel each other as a human race. The reason I'm here is I lost. My cousin was killed by my childhood best friend. I've known him since I was 9. He was a minister that married my wife and I. He was on some meds that he was given as a vet for PTSD supposedly. But all 5 drugs had 5 unifying characteristics. Agitation, they had hallucination, they had suicidal tendencies. He killed because he hallucinated pubic hairs and thought she had cheated and she hadn't been in the house in a month. It took me 2 days to figure out what happened. My aunt said when they cleaned up the house, they found 2 full bags of medication. Well, what were they? Oh, nothing, just some medication. We threw them out. I did some research. I found out what he was on. Nobody knew he was on them. I found out what he was on, and I know why he killed. So I was going to make a film simply entitled, Why Did It Happen? Why Did Cedric Kill Karen? 2.5 months of marriage after 4 years of dating. When I looked, I said, it's not about Cedric and Karen, it's about everybody. It's about everybody. And I decided to change the name to Legal Death and Drugs We Trust to help people to realize you shouldn't just trust drugs. As I looked, and I was making this film about opioids, benzos, and SSRIs, I was introduced to this community. I was astonished to think that something called an antibiotic, and my concept of an antibiotic is it gets rid of germs, could destroy a person's entire body, and do it so rapidly. I met so many wonderful that I feel so deeply for as a human. And it is an honor to be here. It's an honor to add what you're going through so often in silence because nobody believes it. Nobody really talks about it very often. At least I hadn't heard of it in my 59 years. To bring that into the mainstream with these other situations that are getting more traction because it's the same problem. It affects your brain. It affects your body. It hurts your spirit. It's an uncertainty. Will I live today? Will I die tomorrow? How will I feel? It's terrible. Pain is pain. I don't even like having the flu. So we need to really be a world community, a community of all affected people to actually make a difference, make our voices heard internationally as one solid roar. To say we don't. They're not even aware that it's in their IV bag or eye drop, and the it's supposed to work. Nobody should go to a medical facility and get damaged. You can stay at home and be damaged all by yourself. You'll probably be less damaged. So we're living in a world where the death rate is skyrocketing from the very medication that is supposed to be making us better. I have a real problem with that. And there also needs to be more understanding from the family members and the friends. These people that see the people that they know and have loved for years going through these changes, and they don't believe, they don't understand it. They believe a doctor who only talks to their loved one for 5 or 10 minutes, and they echo, oh, it's all in your mind. These are very real problems. And I stand with you. I'm going to do everything in my power to help all of you to roar. And it's going to take a very sizable, very focused roar for them to finally hear and start making some real and necessary.
Thank you so much, Tim. That's a message that we all need to hear. This is not just so many different areas. The opioid crisis has garnered a whole ton of attention. It's the same problem. I know when I was growing up, there were posters in our high school about just say no to drugs. We're talking about hardcore drugs, heroin, cocaine. We have a new problem where we need to say no to drugs. And the drug dealers are the big pharmaceutical companies that are making billions off of our pain. We need to say no to the drug dealers, the doctors and pharmacists that have been taught this is the only solution to your problem and have not been taught about all the harm that they cause. We need to learn to say no to drugs and look at what the other options are. We live in an amazing world. There are plants all around us that God created as healing agents, and we've all but forgotten them. When I left this rally last year, I left with a kidney infection. I went to my doctor to confirm that that is indeed what it was. And she, of course, handed me a prescription. Fortunately, it wasn't Cipro, but and she told me the only way you will get over this is if you take it. I had a whole ton of nettles. Most people think of them as weeds. They sting when you they're one of the best things on the planet for curing a urinary tract infection. And a few months later, I was seeing a specialist. We did another urine sample. Sure enough, I didn't have a urinary tract infection anymore, and I had not touched her drugs. I'm learning to say no to drugs. There are a ton of these, but they're doled out like candy, and that's true of the opioids, that's true of fluoroquinolones, that's true of antidepressants, and all of them have side effects that are often far worse than what they are claiming to do. Together, we gotta join hands. So our next speaker is busy trying to tell other people about this tragedy. But Jerzy Kaplan is from Florida, and she was living an amazing life. And 10 years ago, that all came to a sudden end. And Virginia is going to tell us what happened. And thank you so much, Virginia, for making the trip all the way from Florida to be able to share with us.
I had an amazing marriage, children, and it took absolute AIDS. I was manager of a huge health club. Las Vegas. I had been for 6 years. And I was given an injection that and I thought I had a sinus infection coming on. October 2008, almost 10 years ago. And they did an EKG. I had a headache. The EKG was 100% perfect. They took me in the back and they called in a doctor from my medical association, my primary doctors association, and he said something about Levaquin. I didn't recognize the name. I had always been healthy. I had never been on meds or antibiotics. So he sent a nurse over and hooked up the first IV bag of Levaquin. Within 5 seconds, I had burning pain throughout my body, like acid running through my veins. My son had come in and was sitting next to me, and I said to him, I said, "Oh my goodness, something has happened to my legs." I couldn't lift my legs off the bed, and I didn't have any legs. They were not, I couldn't control them. So he called the nurse back over and said, "Something has happened to my mom." The nurse came, did something to the IV bag, and the nurse actually said, "Oh, I guess I gave it to her too strong, too fast," and adjusted the bag. Well, it didn't make any difference. They sent me home in a wheelchair, unable to walk, with a prescription for 13 more days of IV Levaquin at home. Now, I was cultured twice in the hospital, which I found out later. And so I go home, and the nurses came to my house every night and hooked me up to a bag of IV Levaquin. Now, I couldn't walk. I was in serious pain. My mind was shot out. So for 4 nights, they came to my house. On the 5th night, my hands had blown up like boxing gloves. So those home nurses sent me back to the hospital. They did another EKG, and I suddenly have 2 heart conditions. In 4 days, 4 or 5 days, 2 heart conditions. So from that point on, so they sent me home with 10 days by mouth. So I took 3 or 4 of those pills, thinking this is what I'm supposed to do to get better. And on about the 12th day into the whole crisis, I went to my primary doctor's office, and the first doctor I saw, she said, "Oh my God, we need to do some testing to make sure your muscles are not digesting, to make sure your kidneys are not digesting your muscles." So they did what was called an ANA test. And yes, my first diagnosis was I now suddenly have a connective tissue disorder. Now, when you have a connective tissue disorder, imagine all the tissues that you have in your bodies. It's like 95% of your body. So, the second appointment there was the doctor tried to say I was suicidal and wanted to call 911 on me because I was sitting in the wheelchair that my son pushed me in, and I was sitting there crying, whimpering in pain. And I said, "I am not suicidal. I am trying to find out what the heck has happened to me." So from that point on, they sent me to their neurologist, their rheumatologist, their orthopedic, their ear, nose, and throat. And on in my body. And obviously I have muscle and bone problems. I recently was tested, and I have severe damage. I am terminal. It's a blessing that I have lived this long. There's really no reason for it other than the fact that I've changed my lifestyle totally. Non-toxic, everything. But I'm blessed to be here. I've made thousands and thousands of friends over the last 10 years. All my friends are all damage victims. And they're the best friends that you can have in the world because they're lifelong friends now. And so there's a group of us that go all over and advocate and try and spread the word to people. I just spoke at a hospital, a heart hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas, in front of 4 or 5 cardiac surgeons who are now becoming aware, and they no longer prescribe fluoroquinolones. So that's basically my story. We're a community of mutated individuals. There's nobody like us in the world. There's not too many things that permanently damage your DNA and your mitochondria with no repair in the future. There's no cure, there's no treatment. We've been denied by the medical community. This has been going on for 30 years. Hushed up by all the governments, hushed up by all the medical associations. And it's a worldwide, I don't know, epidemic. I don't even know what the word is. It's murderous. Our bodies have been criminally assaulted. And the pharmaceutical companies are, trying to whittle the way out of it. And that's basically my story. And I tell it all the time. That people, hand out our cards that take us seriously and save lives.
Thank you so much, Virginia. You are a pain warrior, turning your pain into a purpose to help others, and that's just one of the most noble things that you can do. One of the avenues of advocacy that Virginia and several others here have pursued is they spoke at a joint meeting of the FDA and CDC in 2015 about the dangers of fluoroquinolones. This was an absolutely very, very rare event for the CDC and FDA to come together and have an actual public meeting. And I want to read some of the information that came out of that meeting. Okay, we're in 2018. This was 3 years ago, and although this information is out there, the doctors aren't even aware of it. So out of that meeting, the FDA put out an update and warning for fluoroquinolone antibiotics. And it says that fluoroquinolones have risks and benefits that should be considered very carefully, said Edward Cox, MD, Director of the Office of Antimicrobial Products in the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. It's important that both healthcare providers and patients are aware of both the risks and benefits of fluoroquinolones and make an informed decision about their use. That's not happening. Fluoroquinolones are antibiotics that kill or stop the growth of bacteria. While these drugs are effective in treating serious bacterial infections, an FDA safety review found that both oral and injectable fluoroquinolones are associated with disabling side effects involving tendons, muscles, joints, nerves, and the central nervous system. These side effects can occur hours to weeks after exposure to fluoroquinolones and be permanent. Because of the risks of these serious side effects generally outweighs the benefits for patients with acute bacterial sinusitis, Virginia was being treated for a suspected sinus infection. So they're recommending that it is not used for acute bacterial sinusitis prevention of chronic bronchitis and uncomplicated urinary tract infections. The FDA has determined that fluoroquinolone should be reserved for use in patients with these conditions who have no alternative treatment options. And the others that were at that FDA meeting, a whole lot of work needs to be done. It was acknowledged on paper. The FDA did not send that out to the doctors. And they weren't even as strict. They didn't bother saying, those different infections. They just said, there's a possibility of permanent, rare. So they're not rare. They are permanent. Our next speaker is Peter Dunn. He's a local boy, lives Peter was given fluoroquinolones for traveler's diarrhea in different regions of the he's still facing the effects, and he's going to tell us more of his story.
Thanks, Cindy. My best to say. Start by giving you a bit of my timeline. 1998, I went to Africa for the first time. I was going to teach in a school called the Bungie Evangelical School of Theology. I'm a theologian. I teach New Testament. So before I left, I was really, really afraid of malaria because I'd known, I had a good friend in Switzerland who died of it, and I knew of a professor whose wife died of malaria. And I don't know if you heard about the Canadian Chapman twins who came back from Africa, from Cote d'Ivoire, and died in the hospital here because the hospital didn't know that they were suffering from malaria. So I had this deep fear of malaria. So I went to the Missionary Health Institute in just in North York here, and spoke with Dr. Timothy Kelton about my fear of malaria. And he says, "Oh, don't worry, we got just the thing for you." And he prescribed Lariam, or what's called mefloquine. And he said, "You take these pills before and then after, and you won't get malaria." And sure enough, I did not get malaria. And he said, "Oh, and here's another pill, and you're going to thank me for this. It's called Cipro." And he says, when you get really sick, you just take this and it'll cure whatever you get. Traveler's diarrhea, any kind of tropical problem you might have. So I said, okay, I'll take it. Now, what happens? I come back from my first trip and I had diarrhea the whole trip just about. And then for about 2 weeks afterwards, I continued to squirt every day. And so then when I went to, but I did eventually get over it. So, but when I went to the Missionary Health Institute for my next trip to Africa, which was next spring in 1999, Dr. Kelton asked me, "So, how did it go?" I said, "Oh, well." And he said, "But how was your health?" And I go, "Well, I did have diarrhea." And he said, "Well, didn't you take the Cipro?" And I go, "No, I thought it would be better if I got over it on my own." "Oh, I suffer," he says. "I suffer." So after that, I went to Africa about 6 or 7 more times, and I took the pills at the end of my trip because I figured, well, there's no point in taking it in the middle because I'll just get another bug halfway through the trip and be sick again. So I took it at the end of my trip, and I did this about 6 times, maybe 7 times. So I took a total of 36 to 42, 250 gram Cipro pills. I never realized that there were serious side effects to these pills. This was between 2000 and 2006 that I took the pills, and the first black box warning, which would have given me a clue of some of the problems I had later, was in 2008. Black box warning about tendinitis. They said it could these pills could cause tendinitis. So I was basically told that it was a safe pill. To me, that's not consent. Consent is when you're told and warned about the dangers of a pill or a treatment, and then given the choice to decide whether you should take it or not. But informed consent tells you, oh, here are the dangers and these are the things that might happen to you. And that way, if you decide that you're going to take the pill anyway, and they do happen to you, then you'll know what hit you, right? But if you don't know that there's any dangers, then when you take the pill, you don't know that it was the pill that caused it. It's kind of like rat poison. The rats eat the poison, they walk away, and they die later, right? The reason why they do that is because if rats die right in front of the meat that you just fed them with rat poison in, they stop, the other rats won't eat it. So it's a slow poison that hits you later. So basically, here are the symptoms, some of the symptoms that I got from Cipro. I had joint pain in my knees, in my hands. I had arthritis in my hands. I had Achilles tendinitis. I remember one day at the gym I was stretching. I did a stretch that I'd done 100 times, 1,000 times before. And I stretched and I felt my Achilles tendon tear. And by the way, I wasn't getting old. I'm 55 today, but that was 15 years ago. I was still only in my early 40s. So I tore my Achilles tendon. Unfortunately, I've never had a rupture like some of the people here. A complete rupture where the tendon completely breaks. I've never had that. And I'm very thankful for that. I also began to have body-wide tendon pain. I was treated by a chiropractor for a shoulder tendinitis. And then one day, my wife and I were in the Orkney Islands, and I remember being at the top of the Kirkwall Museum, and I was lying down just getting some rest, and then I stood up. That's the thing. I wasn't playing basketball, which is what I like to do. I just stood up. That was in 2013. I stood up, and all of a sudden I felt something tear in my knee, and I was in pain for the next 6 weeks. I had peripheral neuropathy. So that meant that if I typed for about 10 seconds, 30 seconds, my hands started going numb and starting to tingle. Or I pick up the phone and put up the hand would get numb. And so there's certain things that I can't do anymore. Dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is when your body's good bacteria are dead, and then the bad bacteria start taking over. So if you notice, good bacteria in my head, I have bad bacteria inside. That's when I'm not really bad. Because one day I was doing some work for my wife. She was doing some research in the garage, and I was doing this work, and I ended up with really a lot of pain in my feet. I couldn't figure out what this pain was. So I started doing some Google searches, because my best doctor is Dr. Google. So I look up this, and I found out that it's the same thing that caused my pain. Fell from the ladder a couple times. I just missed the last step and fell on my ass. And so proprioception, you know, when you don't know where your feet are. So and he looks at me like this. He didn't have a single answer. My diabetic neuropathy, main cause of peripheral neuropathy is diabetes. So, about the other causes of neuropathy, he didn't have a single suggestion. That was in 2012 actually. So I go on this diet, this low-carb diet, and the neuropathy starts going. So I was sure that it was diabetes. And then, when I was in Crosby, I stood up in that museum, and my tendon, my quadriceps tendon tore my leg, and I couldn't bend my leg anymore. I had to keep it straight for 6 weeks. That's when I started thinking, maybe and he starts out by saying, well, levaquin tendinitis is if you've taken a fluoroquinolone class drug such as levaquin or Cipro. I go, Cipro? Really? That's what I took. So then I realized that my tendon problems that I'd had for years was caused by Cipro. That was 2013. The last time I took Cipro was 2006. And remember I said I lost some weight? I lost about 40 pounds. Well, I have this theory that my tendinitis got worse after losing weight because the fat sequestered some of the toxicity. So I think that explains why. Anyway, here are some of the things that I was trying a low-carb, high-fat diet, low fats. My neuropathy, I think, is healing. I had an immediate recovery from the symptoms of neuropathy. So I can hold my phone up. I haven't tried canoeing yet. And I continue to have problems with my tendons. I have sore tendons, inflexible tendons in my body. This is 2018. Remember, I took this drug between, 2000 and 2006. So I continue to have sore tendons. I know it's not aging because I'll be sitting in a room of octogenarians, that's people who are 80 years old, and they won't have to stand up and walk around because it's painful to sit. So for me, it's painful to sit, it's painful to walk, it's painful. I get back pain just standing up, so the only real position where I'm really comfortable is lying down. And if you're in a conference or in an airplane, they don't actually allow you to lie down. So events like this, even like this, I have to deal with these issues. And I would say that I use crutches about 5 to 10% of every year. So that's how often I need crutches, because I'll have an episode of tendinitis in my foot, Achilles tendon, or in the quadriceps tendon in the knee. So I did go to the doctor after the episode in Kirkwall. She offered me NSAIDs. You know, like I was taking ibuprofen for the pain. She offered me a more powerful NSAID. She also offered me Crestor. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a statin drug. Statin drugs are notorious for causing muscle pain. So that's exactly what somebody suffering from tendinitis needs, is another drug that will cause pain, right? Crestor, these statin drugs are notorious for causing muscle pain in at least 10% of the people that take it. And that's what she offered me because my cholesterol is very high. Apparently, I learned later that when you have stress in your body, you're in pain, your cholesterol, because cholesterol is what your body uses to heal your body. Every cell in your body is made of cholesterol. Your nerves are made of cholesterol. So here I had high cholesterol, and I needed the cholesterol apparently, but she wanted to lower it. Anyway, I have a desire to stay away from doctors as much as possible. I don't have much hope that the medical profession and but I'm thankful that Mark has organized this so that we can at least try to make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing both your story and some of your healing journey and just some of the additional complications and medical treatments that, again, make things worse. It's interesting, Peter talked about the poor proprioception. I was given Cipro 30 years ago. Back then it was used as the big guns. It was the third antibiotic given to me to treat a case of bronchitis, recurring bronchitis. Read recently that most bronchitis is actually viral and doesn't need antibiotics at all. I don't know if back then mine was viral or bacterial or not. The fact that it took 3 different antibiotics to treat it makes me think that, yeah, it probably was. But my story is very, very different from some of the others. It was a gradual decline in health. But the poor proprioception, I'm going to sort of share my story throughout the rest of the afternoon. But I have 2 boys on the autism spectrum. And as we try to figure out what's going on with them and all their different challenges, that term proprioception came up. And it's like, wow, yeah, that's me. I run into walls all the time. I am constantly running into tables. I have no concept of where my body is in space. So I just assumed, well, that might be some sort of autism type trait that's running in the family. And it wasn't until, I'm sure it was just this past year, I was reading an article online about peripheral neuropathy, and that's one of the manifestations of peripheral neuropathy. Up to that point, I'd only heard of the pain or the tingling, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's one more symptom of fluoroquinolone toxicity that I'm experiencing. So thank you, Peter. It's good to know that others have discovered that too, and that it's very prevalent for people. I am a klutz. And it's nice to know that there's a reason why. Our next speaker is Jane Crosby. Jane has come here all the way from San Diego, California. She's quite cold. This is a nice sunny day, but Jane is lost it on an iPad. I'm trying to use an iPad so it doesn't go away, and it still gets away. Jane was floxed in 2009, and she has been an incredible advocate since then. She is one of the admins for the main Facebook group that supports people with fluoroquinolone toxicity. And she's attended several of the rallies that have happened before and the meeting of the FDA and CDC. She is also part of the Foundation for Fluoroquinolone's Toxicity Study and Research, and so she'll be telling us about her journey and about the foundation. So, thank you, Jane.
I'm Jane. did not have side effects from Levaquin. I had immediate direct damage. Within 12 hours, I symptoms, I'll call it. It was direct damage, mental and physical, and I called my doctor back that morning, and I told him I have huge white clumps under my skin all over my body, and I'm feeling very weird. I can't even explain it. It just feels like my life force has left me. And he said, it will go away. Just finish the script. It will go away. Finish the script. So I did take one more, and I knew I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And I'm still in disbelief of what has happened to me. And it was almost 9 years ago. This November it will be 9 years. And I have still never written down my story because it's so uncomfortable. And to be honest, I really just wanted to forget. But let me tell you a little bit of the highlights of what I remember the most. And that is, one time I had a doctor appointment, and the doctor came in and he was my family. I told him, right now, I'd lost 30 pounds seemingly overnight, and I was wasting away right in front of their eyes. And the doctor who had been treating me since day one did not seem to notice. Everything I said, complained to him about, he never even wrote down. So I went down and put me in the hospital. They scanned me, CT scan, and gave me a colonoscopy and said there's nothing wrong with you. Here's a list of antidepressants. There was probably 100, 300 different antidepressants on the list. One in my mouth, and I don't know what it was. One in my mouth, out the door, and by the time I got home, I was and I was so traumatized. I put myself to bed, didn't get up, didn't go to work, just fell out of life completely. And then at some point I started I had another family intervention. My daughter paid for a therapist of some kind for me, and his report said I was being treated for demonic oppression. I don't know if that was me that said that or him, but that's what it said on the report. Because that's exactly what it looked like. I was seeing things move, hearing voices, nightmares every night. Demons would come to me every night. I was so afraid to go to sleep. And I was even more afraid to wake up because the reality of whatever was happening to me was there all the time, and I was in constant fear. And I don't even remember how long this lasted, but at some point I think I looked things up on the internet, and an angel named Amy found me somehow, someway, directed me to the Fluoroquinolone boards. And that's when I knew what had happened to me. And I was terrified because I did not know what was happening to me. And I was even more terrified when I didn't know what did happen to me. But eventually I came to terms with everything, but I did not heal. My vision at that point, I first month, and then within 3 months I had 2 episodes of just losing my vision temporarily. It was only for a few minutes, but it was very terrifying, and I do believe that is the connective tissue. And it was just like being in the Symptom of the Month Club. It was something new and different every single month, something not even common to man. Going on in my chest, electrical zaps, chills from the front of my lobe to the back of my neck with pain, and then headaches 2 months. I never had headaches in my life, and I don't now. But at that time, that's what happened. Like I said, I have never written down my story, so it's a little bit vague, but I want to tell you where I am today. My vision has worsened every year. It's barely functional, and that's really what I mourn the most, is my good vision. The day I was prescribed Levaquin, the doctor gave me a clinical exam, and it included a vision exam, and I did not wear glasses. I had no prescription glasses. My vision was absolutely normal. I had no complaints, and within 2 weeks, the complaints started. The Twilight Zone vision event started, and like I said, it's just very unusual. And I can say that I now have scarring going on everywhere. My retinas are scarring. My sinuses are scarring, even though I've never had a sinus infection. I've never had pneumonia, but my lungs are scarring. I had a scar deep in my calf taken out. I had no injury, so I don't know why it would scar there, but that was removed, and my doctor totally supports me and completely believes me, and he stopped giving fluoroquinolones to his patients. He told me that scarring is cellular death. So I don't know what to think about that, except the cellular damage that I have. That's where I am today. But and that's why I really wanted to experience. In 2013, Mark made me an admin of one of the main groups, and I also admin 2 other groups. Other floxies, and people requesting to join the groups. And at that time, our billing system, our procedure was different, and I was able to speak on one-on-one with a lot of people who were requesting to join the group. So I have many messages saved, and the main thing that I would do is to ask them, are you or my doctor, or the pharmacist, or anybody, that this antibiotic could cause severe symptoms and possibly permanent damage, and they always said no. They were not warned. I can't remember any of them that ever said their doctor warned them. So, another thing I would ask is, did they offer you any other antibiotic? And a very disturbing thing would come up. And this was not rare. It would come up pretty often. They would say, I told my doctor this. And they would say, okay, and takes the procedure from Levaquin. And the And I think this is what needs to change, and it's changing, but just too slow. People are being damaged, lives are being ruined as we speak because doctors are not being informed fast enough. The job that we are doing right now should not even be, FDA should be doing this, not the victims, but that's what we do. I do believe that's a major problem, and that needs to change. And Mark wants me to talk a little bit about our foundation, and it was formed in 2015. Yes? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm not a big talker anyway, so I'll be short. Our foundation was formed because there was a lack of research and study on floxed people. So this was our main objective, to get this done, and we were able to do this. Last year we recently finished a study showing, what is happening to us at a molecular and mitochondrial level, and I will leave that information for our director to give to you, so I'll save that for him. So I think that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Oh, what a terrible story. Heartbreaking. And unfortunately, her heartbreaking story is repeated again and again and again and again. The FDA just this summer came out with another health warning about the psychiatric effects, and let's see if I can find where it went. The new label change will add that low blood sugar levels, also called hypoglycemia, can lead to coma, and the label will also make the mental health side effects more prominent and more consistent across the systemic fluoroquinolone drug class. The mental health side effects to be added to or updated across all the fluoroquinolones are disturbances in attention, disorientation, agitation, nervousness, memory impairment, serious disturbances in mental abilities called delirium. They also indicated suicide. I mean, that's part of delirium and depression and suicide. Tim was telling me the numbers, I can't remember it exactly, but something like 80 people commit suicide every minute or something like that across the world. It's an epidemic. Drug-induced damage. And they're not looking at that. They're looking at anything but that. As a matter of fact, if someone is depressed, the first treatment is drugs. And it's very interesting. I'm actually writing a book on depression, how to help someone else deal with depression, because it's been in my life since I was a kid. And only 11% of the people given antidepressants actually respond positively to them. This is research out of Harvard. That's staggering. 89% of the people given one of those pills is not going to benefit from it. But the majority of them are going to have side effects. Especially in those under 24. There are black box warnings in the US saying that those under 24 will have a higher chance of suicidal ideation. They're still being prescribed like candy to those under 24. but it doesn't stop at those. Anyone is capable of that. And the speaker that was scheduled for yesterday and this is a long story. He was given an antidepressant. It wasn't helping, so he took more. And it looked like he was improving. His energy was better, his focus was better, but he went into psychosis. And although everyone around him thought he was getting better, he was getting worse. And he initially was then had been thinking of hurting himself or others, he would have said, yeah, nothing wrong with it. And he killed his 11-year-old son. What are the other options first? Do I really need this drug? In many, many cases, the answer is no, you don't really need that. There's something else that can be done first. Dietary modifications. Counseling. That's a whole other realm of, another topic for another day. So, our next speaker is Jerzy Tyszkowski. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And actually, I'm not seeing him. Is he here? He's hiding. Okay. Jerzy is from Poland. Came to the U.S. for love. And unfortunately, that's a different story. He is part of the foundation that James he has his own flock story to share, and I hope he will also share some of the research that he was able to give a presentation on last night.
Jerzy Tyszkowski. My story is very similar to other floxes. They're not getting better. Every year I got something new, and the last symptoms, I got very low oxygen level. I got inflammation of liver. I got problem with my coordination, with memory, brain. This is too many symptoms. I like to concentrate more on our foundation. So since I can do some reading, because I got double vision and have kind of focus on I was looking for, like everybody, what's going on with my body, why I got sick. And I was devastating when in 2013 I got study for mitochondria with 3 professors from Oxford. They told me my mitochondria is functional just 9%. So the other doctor said, you should be dead. I was 2 years in the bed with almost to the bathroom. And the doctors are, they're not believing what we're suffering. So the most referral what I got was psychiatrist, which finally psychiatrist too, because maybe I'm really crazy. There's something in my mind. But finally one doctor told me, you have fluoroquinolone toxicity. I said, I was right telling the doctors I got. Devastation was just horrific. So study after the study, as I started learning from basics, then I decided to do something more. I met a group of people in 2013, and we did first DNA study on small group of people of 5. Genomic DNA damage, and what we find it was surprising for everybody, because people taking one pill and 350 pills got the same damage, and they were pretty crippled. After the study, the professor who did the study talked to the FDA, and the FDA said that numbers of people are too small. So I said, okay, so we should do bigger study. And I said, what is the minimum? And they said 50 people. So 2015, I established Foundation for Fluoroquinolone Toxicity Study, and I need some help, because my understanding and my language, because the brain damage got really crippled, my writing, my spellings, basic words, and the worst thing is the short memory. I can remember when I was 3 years old, I cannot remember what was just a few minutes ago. So I asked Jane for help. So Jane got the best friend and the best support to do the study with me, try to accomplish. And we were trying to put this group together. It takes a year to complete the control group and children never have fluoroquinolones. I'd like to check something which could be important in future. The result of study, we're waiting 1 year. I think the 1 year is extended time. We didn't know why it's so long. Now we just suspecting why it was so long. So the result of the study was very surprising. I'd like to tell you just briefly about the lab. The lab is decades on the US science field, and they're doing study for FDA, they're doing study for law enforcement, they're doing study for FBI. They are really good with toxicology, because they have to testify in the court about poisoning. So that's exactly what happened to us. We got poisoned. We got really poisoned, and we never even realized how we got poisoned. Because when you got too much alcohol, you got hangover, and then you go good. And this is poison for today, for whole your life. We wish we gonna find anything which can remove the poison from us. So The study basically was for checking if the fluoroquinolones can attach to our DNA and our mitochondria DNA. But the laboratory and the scientists like to go little bit forward, one step forward. And they did the, that's my brain, they did the in vitro study. So they took the control blood, the person never took any antibiotic, and fluoroquinolone, they add levaquin, and they add to the tube ciprofloxacin. And after 3 minutes 3.61 minutes, we got the damage of our DNA. The first damage, 361. Then after 12 minutes, we got another damage. So that means the two molecules on our DNA for outside the helix, they inside the helix, and they making, we call them modification. So they are composed in our original DNA. In the group, we got people who are suffering the fluoroquinolones disability for decades, and we got people for few years. The damage is still there. So all kind of supplementation helping us, and I calling this patching. The patching is like we patch the holes in the wall. We try to be better. We're taking glutathione, we're taking vitamins, amino acids that keeping us alive, but the damage is still there. The doctor treatments sometimes make us worse because we got mitochondria damage, and some drugs are not indicated to use by mitochondria dysfunction, like steroids, like chemotherapy, like NSAIDs, like many other drugs which make our status worse. So after they did the study, they know the molecules and the weight which is attaching to them. They compare with our tests, and 99% of the test was positive and some was negative, because that we test for just two fluoroquinolones, levaquin and Cipro. We didn't test for Avalox, and the one was floxin, and some people take floxin almost 30 years ago. It's still there, but we have to do another test. The children was just 4. We have to do more to prove scientifically. I don't even think about what I like to say before we got the proof. But I'm worried if we could get the proof, that will be a huge problem for global, not even for our country and Canada. The prescribing on fluoroquinolones on global scale is about billions a year. Billions a year. So we're talking about something we cannot even imagine. So finalize that our all group who took the ciprofloxacin have the same damage of DNA. They got guanine attaching to DNA to the whole chemicals of the drug. I mean, whole chemical structure. So the scientists can easily find it, when they add the molecular weight of the antibiotic plus guanine, they find the adduct. We call called adduction. This is something like extra thing in our DNA, and something extra in your cell and your mitochondria that they are not working properly. This is abnormal for our body. Have something strange. So our immune system probably doesn't recognize this, foreigner body, and the many reactions are pretty much immune, anti-immune. The other study for levofloxacin was the same. I mean, some suffer less, some suffer more, but we got the same damage. How you can make it? It's impossible to make a fake test. This is life. That's what's going on now. This should be concerned for our government. They should be concerned for our medical society, for scientists, because we can talk about the biggest problem in pharmaceutical company since we know about pharmaceutical. So our mitochondria study showed the same results, the same damage, the same molecules, because mitochondria is very crucial. Mitochondria looks beautiful. It's blue like some kind of creature from out of our planet, but it's so crucial. So the free radicals can damage the membrane and the toxin going in it and making damage on the mitochondria DNA. I'll summarize that. We are looking for, we did everything what is possible for 2 sick people to do with your support, with the support study. We find the best scientists what we can find, and I'm on one hand happy that was a person who can stand up, because the other scientists were afraid, and they are afraid until today. We're looking for someone who wants to say only, well, this is not normal. This is absolutely not normal. We cannot find it. So we are not living in the era of Louis Pasteur, the guy who immune himself before he gave the immune to others. So wake up the world. We have to find people who can say this damage is real, this damage will have consequences, not even for us, that could be consequences for another generation. So we have to do something. We're calling for our government, Canadian government, scientists, doctors. Don't ignore this, because one day you can be backfire and you can be sick too, like we are. And we got doctors floxed too. Now they understand, because the chaos touched them too. But before, the doctors are pretty ignoring our problems. I think today I do better than yesterday. So thank you everybody, and I wish you the best in Canada for more advocacy. Thank you, Mark. Oh my God, your sister is very fluent in English. I'm just jealous.
Thank you so much, Jerzy. Thank you for what you shared. Thank you for the hard work to even get to the point to be able to share that. That research is stunning, flabbergasting, terrifying. He said I'm really good at English, but I'm at a total loss for words. But then I am floxed, and finding words is one of my challenges. But thank you so much for that, and his admonition about the doctors needing to wake up, that pretty much they only wake up when they themselves get floxed. one of the people here who's listening and participating, helping hand out cards, handed one to someone, and he asked about, and she said, the damage that they do. And he said, let it up. Just that's what we're up against. Doctors that don't care about the patient. Doctors that think they know it all. Doctors that refuse to listen to their patients. It's criminal. It's sad. But it's what we're up against. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Teri. Teri is known as Teri Koko, or Teri Cipro victim. She is one of the co-founders of these rallies. She's become a dear friend. She has worked her butt off, and she is going to pay dearly for weeks for all the hard work she's done here. I'm not exactly sure what she's going to share. We didn't talk about it, but she has her own story, not just of being floxed, but she'll touch on that. I put her on the spot on there, so if she doesn't, it's my fault.
Thank you. And thanks for coming out. And we're going to be in YouTube. Basically, I've been a floxy victim since the first pill was April 30th, 2017, and it was Cipro XL, and it was 1,000 milligrams of one pill. Within 2 hours of the first pill, my eyes went crisscross and double vision. I had no idea that an antibiotic can do such a thing. And again, within a few hours, because this was early evening, and a few hours later, my second adverse reaction, I couldn't sleep. I was lucky if I slept 1 to 2 minutes for a total of 20 minutes that night. And within the 1 to 2 minutes, I also experienced a psychotic nightmare. And I couldn't sleep for a little bit more than 2 years, 20 minutes total a night, sleeping only 1 to 2 minutes interval. And for 4 months, having the same nightmare. Anyway, within hours, days, weeks, and months, I had well over 30 serious adverse damages that included neuropathy, tendon ruptures, partial tendon ruptures to my biceps and the shoulders, tendon ruptures. My hair was falling out the first 4 months. I could go on and on. I was given this actually for a suspected UTI that I didn't even have. The horrific part about this is my family doctor at the time, 7 months ago, had prescribed me clindamycin for a cut that I sustained on my right foot. Not a cut, a sprain. And it was pretty bad. It was a slight partial tendon rupture to my ankle. I fell down 6 years. In any case, this clindamycin, she gave me like 1,200 milligrams for 10 days. And with that, after I stopped for 10 days, it helped. Well, actually, the infection was gone in the foot. And within 3 weeks, I suddenly gained 25 pounds. And then also my menstrual cycle stopped, premature menopause, I guess. And then I did have upper middle flank pain. So when I told my doctor this after stopping clindamycin, and I told her, like, I think maybe this medication you gave me did something, she kind of laughed and said, no, it's a UTI infection. And I just looked at her, and she's ready to write me another script. And I said, I'm not taking anything else. So, the pain was worse at night, in the evenings. And it didn't get any better. And 7 months later, I literally went crawling back to her, telling her, not realizing the situation for myself. And well, she pulled out, she basically prescribed me Cipro XL 1,000 milligrams. And she did do a urine test, but she didn't send it out. It was just within her own medical facility. So, after the first pill, as I told you, the Cipro pill, I had the 2 serious adverse events. But by the 9th day, I basically ended up in the ER, where they confirmed that I did not have a UTI infection, not then, and not even 7 months or a year later, because they said through the tests that they just conducted in the ER, it would show, even if I had a UTI. So, by the 9th day, I had like a full-blown just lots of damage, I'll just skip ahead a little bit. By September, so this is April 30th, my first pill. By September 2013, the same year, I couldn't stand or walk more than 5-10 minutes at a time. I couldn't even sit or sleep. I still had the severe insomnia. I still managed to get out in September, because then when I realized, this is where it comes. Mark Girard. How I found Mark Girard was within the 3-4 months that I was poisoned. I said, there's something not right here, and I quickly Googled. And, Cipro and whatever. And I found Mark Girard in YouTube, Global TV News, 16x9 bitter pills. And I was shocked, of course, and I was horrified when I heard, So, I've heard several doctors that I've talked to, I'm sorry I'm jumping around, I've heard several doctors that I've talked to say, do not check Google or anything for, any kind of medication reactions or anything. So that is the place where I learned everything, just to let you know. I'm sure many of us, or all of us did. So in September, when by September I know exactly what's happened to me, and I started doing extensive research, more of a history research, and where this all started, and possibly how many people are affected, and there has been other floxy victims, strong leaders like David Melvin, who's an he's an investigator for the Chicago police. He actually was forced to retire due to Levaquin pills, and he became a very strong advocate. That's another one that I found in Google, and I follow his webpage as well, and got lots of information because of his contacts. He's got a lot of research studies, and over the last 10 years, And this is how I started realizing how many people truly are floxed in North America, in Canada, and USA. Actually, sorry, I would watch in the news too, like things like ALS is on the rise, or postpartum syndrome is on the rise in Canada or North America. And I'm thinking to myself, especially the ALS, that was like back in 2014, I think I heard that in the news, and I went, oh my goodness, you know, like, look at the symptoms, look at, like, that could possibly be FQ, you know, fluoroquinolone toxicity. And then the Lyme groups too. And I'm watching the Lyme groups, and I'm looking at their symptoms and thinking, oh my goodness, like the same reactions as, you know, the floxies. And what's the other? Oh, the soldiers, Cipro. You know, I ended up going into some of these groups and asking them, have you taken Cipro? You know, like. Experiencing as floxies from these so-called antibiotics. And it turns out that a few of the Lyme victims, for instance, back in 2014, when I told them this and they went and they were shocked and they started spreading the word. So I'm not saying that people that are, you know, being diagnosed with all these diseases, it's fluoroquinolone toxicity. But please do check your history in the last 10 years even, to see if you've ever taken a fluoroquinolone, because that could possibly be linked to the diagnoses you're getting for all sorts of diseases and illnesses. So, you know, again, going back to September, which is 5 months after I was floxed, when I realized and did this history research and all the information and just people being out there not knowing what's wrong with them, I quickly started photocopying, you know, published researches and, you know, handing them out to people, you know, people basically that would start talking with me. I wouldn't really approach people. And then I even made appointments with doctors and or just every time I went to an appointment, I would educate every doctor or specialist that I was seeing, because I had multitude of damages, and also pharmacists, and I just kept doing it. And finally, well, then the advocacy cards I got from Terry Aston in the USA. Her cards were, you know, financial. Had no form of financial assistance, not even from the government. And I continued to give these cards out and talk to people everywhere, every day, every time I went out. And then I created my it was a family group originally, family and friends group, Toronto Flox, fluoroquinolone publicly. I had that in publicly. So doing a great job, and just you know, again, thanks for, you know, listening to this video and giving us an opportunity to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry. I'm just going to give a little rundown of my situation, and then Brother Mark, the main organizer for this room, have shared dramatic reactions instantly. It's not my experience, and it's not the experience of many people, and that's one of the reasons why many people don't connect the dots. And I did not connect the dots. Mark moved in with me 8 years ago because of his health issues, and when he figured out it was because of fluoroquinolones, I still didn't connect the dots. It wasn't until I think it was 3 years ago when talking to Teri and another floxy at one of these rallies that I connected the diagnosis. The next thing was back pain. Okay, I'm 20 years old, have not had an accident, have not had any particular reason, but I've been seeing a chiropractor now for 30 years. And the connective tissue issues. I roll my ankle just very mildly and end up with an ankle sprain that would last 6 months. Very swollen. Then I gave birth to my first child. You can't tell in the video, but I'm 5'10". I'm big boned. I gave birth to a small baby under 7 pounds. I tore so badly I was hospitalized for 3 days. Up here, they don't keep you in the hospital more than 24 hours. And then realized afterwards that delivery, and I mean, he wasn't breached. There was absolutely nothing abnormal about the delivery, but then my uterus and bladder prolapsed. They felt connective tissue damage. It's in my whole body. So I'm 30 years out. I've got the brain fog. I've got chronic fatigue. I've got the problems finding words. I've got the poor proprioception. I've got chronic pain. It's weird. For a few days, it's my ankle, and then it's my knee, and then it's my shoulders, and then it's my wrists, and then it's my knee again. And I've woken up in the middle of the night basically with an ankle sprain from sleeping. Just very, very, very bizarre. And of course, doctors have never had any information for me. I've been given antibiotic for thinking it's all in my head. I now have a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. It just keeps going on, and it's all related to fluoroquinolones. So those that are dealing with just ongoing lousy health for no particular reason, as Teri suggested, take a look at your medical records and figure out what drugs you've been given. Fluoroquinolones cause all of these types of symptoms, but other drugs can cause problems too. And these are all modern diseases or syndromes that didn't exist 50 years ago. Our parents and grandparents did not have fibromyalgia and peripheral neuropathy and chronic fatigue syndrome and you name it. So look into that. So I'm now going to introduce my brother, who again is the one who is the main force behind these rallies. It's really kind of cool. As devastating as being floxed is, it has brought us together. We pretty much separated ways when we were younger, didn't have the greatest childhood. I wanted to get away from family. He wanted to get away from family. So we'd see each other for a couple days every 2 years at Christmas. And we didn't think it was going to happen when he moved in with me. And we're 8 years later, and we've become the best of friends and co-workers, co-advocates for fluoroquinolone toxicity and depression and mental health and the whole drug awareness thing. So I give you my brother and best friend, Mark Girard.
All right, well, I just want to thank Cindy, and I thank everyone for coming out to speak or to just watch and listen or to film for personal reasons or for the multiple documentaries that we have being filmed here. I think I'll take a different approach. Most people have sort of done a timeline effect describing what happened and sort of a chronological sequence. I'll just cover that I was given Cipro and then Levaquin back to back in 2007, and I am one of the people that reacted quickly and had numerous horrific problems right away, and I again have amassed hundreds of symptoms, some trivial, some serious life-threatening problems, and pretty much everything in between. Rather than trying to present them in a sequence of how they happened, I'll just sort of describe head to toe what has happened to me, because these drugs do affect people from head to toe and cause this syndrome because they permeate into every cell of the body. It's the same reason that they're a very useful drug in some rare situations where people need them. The drugs actually do penetrate into every nook and cranny of the body, but that's why they wreak havoc. And so I'll sort of describe what happened to my body from head to toe. I had the neuropathy from head to toe, from the tingling and bugs crawling under my scalp to the pain and sensation in where I was losing clumps of hair. It was like itchy, painful spots that were losing, big old chunks of hair. I had been a long-haired man my life, and I cut all my hair off and started shaving my head because the patches of hair were so, where I didn't have hair were obvious, and also, like Peter described earlier, my scalp was sores and acne and just like wrinkly and stuff, and so I needed to. I couldn't even shave it. I had to basically use my shaver on the trim setting and trimmed my hair off, so I had like 1/8 of an inch every time. So that was the hair. The hair fell out in clumps. It changed color. It got frizzy. What did stay, and so inside my head, I had intracranial pressure going on, just intense pressure. Amazing headaches, pounding, thumping headaches that behind my eyes, and pain in my eyes, and also pain in the back of the skull. As far as the eyes go, I had quite a collection of different visual problems, ranging from the lack of ability to focus on something. My right eye and my left eye wouldn't work together to focus. I noticed at first trying to look at the moon, and it was like there were two moons and I couldn't pull them together. Then I started noticing that I had a different kind of double vision, and that was where I had a second image in each eyeball, sort of a little bit offset from the first image, not quite as vivid or clear, so I had the quad vision thing, the double vision going. I had floaters of all kinds of shapes, little rings, spots, globs, wiggles, splotches. I had a band of gray, like somebody had dropped a curtain, or like I pictured like the window tinting type stuff across a swath of my right eye. I had like wrinkles in my vision. I had balls of light that on my peripheral vision that are going up all the time, and then I had flashing, just like bright flashes, and yellow and purple normally, sometimes white. And then I was getting flashes like they were behind me, like I could actually see in the direction behind me, and I could see these flashes out the back of my head. So that was the different flashes. And then, of course, there was the neurological visual snow, which is like a TV station back in the day when we had broadcast TV, and if you put it on a channel that that didn't have a station broadcasting, it looked like a million bees flying around or something like that. Snow, the visual snow, and so that is still in my vision all the time. It's not nearly as pronounced as it was. I still experience all these problems, but none of them are as bad as they were. So most of them have improved quite a bit. I'm happy to be doing more improving than falling apart. As far as auditory goes, I have tinnitus, ringing in my ears all the time. At its worst, it was probably moderate. Now it's mild. A lot of times I don't even notice it, and then somebody will ask me about my tinnitus, and for the next 3 days I'll realize it's there and remember it and notice it for a while. I had muffled crunching sounds in my ears, distorting everything I heard. And I also had the auditory hallucinations, ranging from actually like big band music playing in the background all the time. And so I wish I could record because I actually hallucinated some pretty good rock. But yeah, it'd be like I'd also hear an alarm clock or like the sound of a dump truck backing up or whatever going off in my head all the time. As far as inside my brain, I had so many different cognitive and emotional issues that that's almost a whole separate discussion. I had like the memory impairment. I couldn't finish sentences. I couldn't watch a television. I couldn't watch a ridiculous low mentality comedy on television. I couldn't follow what was going on. I couldn't even remember what was happening or what was the gist of the program. Certainly couldn't watch a movie and make sense of it, and I couldn't read a book. I would read the same paragraph and same sentence over and over and over again. It would be new to me 20 times in a row, and couldn't make sense of it. I could not follow directions. I could not recognize signs. I'd find myself in the women's room, or I'd flip on the wrong burner and melt a plastic thing that was sitting on the stove, or whatever. All these types of signs that should be easy communication that made sense to me before were not making sense, or I was interpreting them wrong, and I thought they made sense, but I nearly burned the house down. The cognitive, I had memory issues. I used to have photographic memory. They used to take me out of school when I was a kid, study it, to give me long strings of numbers to repeat back, and to do all these different tests. My IQ was supposed to be everything. I knew where it was. Everything. And so when this happened, I had no coping mechanisms, no skills for how to deal with where are my car keys or something. So it's still very, very overwhelming for me. As far as the cognitive problems were severe, I also had obviously some pretty heavy depression. I think what we experience is twofold. The depression from the honest assessment of our life situation being very crappy, and also like a chemically induced depression, wild mood springs. I had anxiety attacks. I went from being a very strong man that would go where I want and do what I wanted to somebody who was cowering in the corner from nothing, crying like a wounded animal and whimpering in fear over nothing. And this went on for months, and I had my teeth, my sinuses, like a sinus drip going that has just been. I can't sense I can't feel like when I've got snot coming out of my face. I don't sense that it's there. So my first clue that I have snot running out of my face again is that it's running down my lip, and I'm embarrassed, and I'm talking to people, and it's like, oh gosh, sorry, and. So that's the sinuses. My sense of smell, I smell things that aren't there, weird burning plastic and gasoline smells, and body smells. I can't tell, is it me that smells weird because I'm floxed, or is it me not knowing, like having strange olfactory senses that aren't accurate? So that's my nose. my mouth, my sense of taste, and then obviously my ability to communicate. I couldn't finish sentences. Partly mine, but that's the mouth thing too. My teeth started cracking and crumbling almost immediately, and now 11 years later, they have finally agreed to pull out the few remaining teeth that they aren't going to, they'd fix them over and over and over again, drill into this, put a new filling in, and 3 weeks, 5 weeks later, it was time to drill that, the filling would come out in my food, and I'd spit it out or swallow it, and they'd be back in that tooth drilling and putting in a new filling 5 weeks later, and they'd do it over and over again. Finally, it's like, I'm done with this. Take the rest of the teeth out. I'm done. And so that just recently happened. As far as my mouth and throat, I have trouble swallowing, and I also have pain in my neck, tension, levels of tension in my neck that I never had before. Pain, part of the pain in the back of my head. In my shoulders, I have 4 bulging discs in the cervical region, pinched nerves there, and nerve pain. I didn't really understand the difference between nerve pain and regular pain until I was up here and had got a pain specialist, and he followed the protocol that they follow, and first he put me on gabapentin, and sure enough, the pain in my cervical region went away, and yet that was the nerve pain, and he said it would be, and the other pain didn't go away, the other body-wide pain, and so I was like, wow, okay, I wasn't real enthusiastic about taking gabapentin, but it worked. And so then he put me on the morphine, and that helped me with the lower back pain and other body-wide pain. So now I'm 5 years into being addicted to morphine and gabapentin, winding it down with the use of cannabis, but still using them and still benefiting from them, but also probably also suffering damage of some sort. In the cervical region, the pain shoots down my arms. The pain and numbness goes down, particularly my right arm, and into my hands. I can't hold things for long. I get muscle weakness in there, pain, spasms, twitching, all kinds of stuff like that. It's not nearly as bad as it ever was before, but that's something that's pretty common for us that I guess I didn't hear mentioned today. It's called fasciculations, and that's the steady little twitching, kind of like when your eye twitches, a tick in your eye or whatever. We get weird spots on it, like a little spot on my thigh or on my arm, and it would just jiggle and twitch, and I'd be like, what the heck is going on there, And so that was just one more thing, and I have in my chest, I've had pulmonary edema, which is fluid in the lungs, kind of except more of a slime. I had altitude sickness when this all happened and set in. I lived at 10,000 feet up in the Colorado Rockies, and I was going to live in Leadville, Colorado for the rest of my life, and I had to, I was waking up blacked out in the hospital every time in a row. The doctor said, you need to move down to a lower altitude and grab your stuff. And sure enough, I've never been able to go back. I moved from 2 miles up to 1 mile up and still had problems, and that's how I ended up, I was living homeless. My life had fallen apart. I'd lost all my stuff. I didn't know what happened. And this dramatic change, my sister stepped up and said, yeah, Mark, you're going to be back on your feet. So the altitude sickness went away, but I still had pulmonary edema. I still had like an asthma issue going. And so I've since then I've had and I've been diagnosed with COPD. So that's the lungs. I've got, I had, my heart would race and, go to beat 60 times a minute while I was lying in bed, and blood pressure fluctuations that were seen at the hospital there. At times my blood pressure would be like 90 over 60, and then an hour later it would be 220 over 180. And they thought the machine was broken and rolled it out, and then they brought a different machine in and strapped it to me, and sure enough, it was doing the same thing. So they hooked both of them to me, and sure enough, it was like, okay, I guess this is happening to you. I have no idea what's going on. Is there pumping blood into my arm, as I'm lying in the hospital? And so, blood pressure kept fluctuating, but it wasn't as bad when after they put me on atenolol and hydrochlorothiazide. They put me on so many drugs, it was ridiculous. I went from no drugs to like 15 drugs in a 3-week run there. And it's, oh, well, you're getting older. And it's like, a couple weeks ago, I'd been climbing 13,000-foot peaks to snowboard on them. And sure enough, that they're trying to tell me that, as so many of the rest of us, that we're getting older, that's why we're experiencing these problems. Respiratory problems, I had the heart problems, I had vascular problems. Blood clots. I had 13 blood clots in my chest and arm. I had a broken blood vessel. I had veins carved from 13 entry points so far, and more scheduled. Some of them in the same area, so they're going to have to dig through scar tissue where they already hacked and pulled sloppy vein tissue out once, and go through the scar tissues. It's painful already to hack out more of these failing veins. I had wicked gastrointestinal problems, diarrhea that wouldn't stop for 3.5 years, 4 years, and that eventually went away when I started taking probiotics, eating fermented foods, and just getting my gut dysbiosis back in shape. As far as the gut goes, I put on a whole bunch of weight. At first I lost like 25 pounds in a hurry. I think I might have been flirting with rhabdomyolysis, because my weight loss was immediate almost, and I was peeing orange. And speaking of peeing, that goes to some of the next symptoms. I had lost control of my bladder. That was one of the first really dramatic symptoms, and we're not talking, a little bit. I mean, I was sitting on the couch, we have to throw the couch up. It's just like, I didn't know what was going on. Oh my gosh, what is happening? Where's this water coming from? And to this day, I don't have sensation in my penis like I used to. I can't really tell whether there's liquid coming out. There's no blood. It's actually painful to orgasm. So that's a real loss. And the veins were carved from my groin down my thigh to my ankle, and so I have pain in my knees. They got loose and disjointed, and then down to the ankles. I had the telltale tendon ruptures that are sort of the stereotypical injury of fluoroquinolone toxicity. I didn't lose but the two next, the peroneal brevis and the peroneal longus, complete severing. They had the surgeon went in, and when he reattached them, he said he'd never seen anything like it. They were frayed, and he had to sew layer upon layer upon layer from one end to the other. The surgery was supposed to go half an hour to 45 minutes, and it went 2.5 hours. So then that was one of 6 surgeries on my ankle. Another time they tried to do a cartilage transplant, and that resulted in they were basically, I still had the blood clots then, and so they were transitioning me from warfarin, which is an anticoagulant that works by thinning the blood, to one called Lovenox, which stops clotting some other way, and they need to use that so you can do surgery, because you can't do surgery when a person's on warfarin. So during that transition period, I blew a blood vessel. So I spent the time in the hospital. Instead of having the surgery that they'd scheduled me for, I was in there, and they were sucking blood out of my foot with a giant needle. and then there was arch pain, horrific pains in the arches, neuropathy from head to toe, and then the pain right in my toes. I had a sensation of intense pain, like right in the middle of both toes. It would come and go, one toe or the other. And it was some of the most intense pain I ever felt, and yet I could tell it wasn't real. It was like there was no pressure, no heat, no other sensations with it. It was just my mind believing that there was horrific pain going on in the middle of these toes, and it would make me cry. But that was that, and I knew that it was fake, and my mind believed the pain was there, but there wasn't anything really causing it. So these drugs affect people like that from head to toe, and again, the vast majority of them have no idea what has happened to them. There are literally millions and millions and millions of people misdiagnosed with lupus, ALS, Parkinson's, fibro, multiple sclerosis, and dozens, hundreds of other conditions. And the few people that do figure out what happened and try and confront their doctors are routinely facing not just denial, not just a wall of denial, but they get mocked, they get ridiculed, they get fired as patients, and we get marked down as being mentally disturbed, or they have labels for people now who believe that they have conditions that they don't, supposedly. And most of these people do have conditions. These people have been poisoned by their doctors and are having adverse reactions to one type of drug or another, and the doctors are calling it conversion disorder. Well, it's not where the patient converts their beliefs into actual sickness. This is where an incompetent doctor converts his inability to see what's really going on into the patient's problem and not his or hers. We're basically all victims of medical incompetence, doctors who were absurdly overconfident in the drugs they're prescribing, and whether that is the case with fluoroquinolones or whatever. There's so many different classes of drugs that the doctors are just ridiculously overconfident in, and they're all causing all sorts of damage to lots of people, and it is routinely misdiagnosed, ignored, belittled, and so on. And so that's why we're here, and I just want to thank again everybody that spoke, and ask everybody to travel safely and hand out as many cards on the way home as possible, wherever you're heading, and just thank you, everyone.